50 minutes after that. So your feet tend to fall asleep, your legs, your hips start to hurt. So it helps to stretch the feet, to get the blood circulating to a certain degree. But it's also these periods in between. Some people think that they're kind of like a toilet break. So in Antaiji, sometimes we sit from morning to night, so-called sessions. And these kinhin periods is the time when you can go to the toilet to the toilet as well. So people tell you, please don't go during Zazen, don't move during Zazen, but if you need to go to the toilet, do it during kinhin, which leads some people to the idea that kinhin basically is nothing like a toilet break, and some people go drink a tea, others smoke a cigarette because, well, it's kinhin, it's not real Zazen. But of course, kinhin is just as good a part of our practice as when we sit. It's not that this is what is important and when we walk it's less important. And actually, I don't know how it worked for you, but a lot of people tell me in kinhin it's much easier. It's much easier. Because where's your mind? You have to, of course, watch your breath, but then you also move your feet. So it's almost impossible to forget your breath because then you can't take the next step. It's much easier to stay here. Of course, does this really mean that it's better for meditation? Not necessarily, because the more you stay here, the less you have this realization. Although, of course, also in kinhin, sometimes you drift off and you realize, I don't actually know, am I breathing out right now? Am I breathing in? Sometimes people forget to take steps and everybody else behind them. Right now we were kind of, how do you say, moving in a strange way. Usually what you would do in a Zen monastery is you go in a square like this. And so people walk like ducks behind each other. And if somebody is kind of drifting off during the Zen, sometimes you wonder, this guy hasn't taken a step in 2 minutes. Is he still alive? Is he still breathing? Of course he's breathing, it's just that his mind is somewhere else. Any thoughts about kinhin? How was it for you?
I mean, for me it's a bit awkward because I shouldn't. No, I'm doing my physiotherapy now.
Yes, yeah.
My left hip. So I should never really, not yet, step on my
I see.
left.
Oh, yeah.
But I am, today I'm not really in a good shape, but I am getting better, so I can do that easier.
Yes.
And it was interesting because what I was taught and that the way that I was finally realized, oh, I can maybe do this with kinhin, for me it was very difficult from
Yes.
the start.
Yeah.
Like, just what do you do? How do you coordinate the whole
Yes.
thing?
Yes.
Much more than really sitting.
Yeah.
Now I do, what I was told was, just take a half step, then you breathe in and straighten your back.
Mm-hmm.
And then wait just a little bit, just like, the breath is here somewhere.
Yes. Yes.
And then relax and
Yeah.
breathe out and
Yeah.
make half a step.
Yeah.
And then, okay, breathe in, breathe out, half
Mm-hmm.
a step.
Mm.
And with this, I'm very comfortable now. So
Mm.
that's what I'm doing.
Mm.
But
Mm.
before I was like totally, all the time moving my body. Now actually the breath is moving, but not all the time my body. Yeah, that for me is the easiest way to do it.
I see, yeah. Yeah, some people it helps to kind of also imagine that when you breathe out, when you breathe in, kind of there's the straightening thing. In yoga, it's much more important than in Zen that like you're breathing in, then you do this, you're breathing out. But also in Zen kind of when you're breathing in, both sitting but also walking, there's this kind of upward, not a big movement, but this, and then when you go down, it sometimes helps to imagine that you're breathing through the back of your foot. Of course, you don't have any nostrils, you can't breathe through it, but you imagine that when you take this step, slowly you breathe through that foot that you just moved forward. And that also helps you to keep you grounded. So during the sitting, you can also do that. For example, if you have pain in the feet, it hurts. Sometimes it can help that you imagine that you breathe through that pain, through the pain that you experience, through it into the ground that you're sitting on. Anything else? Any other questions? Anything that you felt about Kinhin?
I kind of alternate, even in a short session, between sort of what you talked about, the European idea, Vipassana idea.
Yes.
Every moment you're conscious of what you're doing.
Yes.
And that, I think you said what you saw in Japan, which was you just you don't focus on everything. You just breathe breath and step, breath, step. And I kind of naturally sort of fall a few minutes this, a few minutes of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I never, it's kind of a, arbitrary in my mind.
Okay.
They seem to have different purposes in a way.
In Theravada, there is the Vipassana meditation technique, but often it's combined with a different technique that's called Samatha or Shamatha. For example, they also have it here in Japan, Goenka style Theravada meditation. I attended one of the 10 days retreats there, and they tell you for the first 3 days to focus on the area between your nose and your mouth, this triangle. And that's basically this kind of focus on only one thing. And of course what happens is you start to think, you realize you're thinking, so you bring your focus back to that triangle. And then the 2/3 of the retreat after that, the last 6 or 7 days, it's more kind of an opening up. But what they do there is basically body scan. So you're still focused, but you're not focused on one point, but you kind of shift your awareness from the tip of your head to the feet and then back again. But at one point, you get to this point where you don't have to consciously always shift, but it's kind of a coming and going like an ocean. And the whole body is aware. So there's this opening up. And I wouldn't say that in Japan we always try to focus on one thing, because, for example, in Antaiji, where I was training as a monk for almost 30 years, when you're the cook, you're also responsible for answering the telephone. And when guest comes, also often the cook is the person that first has to greet them. And the cook in the afternoon, while cooking, you have to prepare the bath, the hot bath, and you have to let it in. It usually takes a couple of minutes. So when you're the cook, it's not enough to just concentrate on cutting the carrots. If the telephone is ringing, you have to answer that telephone. And if you opened the tap of the bath 5 minutes ago, you have to not forget about closing it 5 minutes later. So just being in that one action that you're concentrating on is not enough. Actually, multitasking is also part of the practice when you're the cook. And in our daily lives, like if you have a family, but you also have a job and there's other things and you have a meditation practice, just being in the moment is usually not enough of an answer. You have to listen, what are my kids doing, but there's also other tasks that you have to take care of. So for me, Zen practice is not just do one thing and forget about the rest. Often it's, you have to listen to the whole music, the whole orchestra of life. And the whole orchestra of life is there's a family going on, there's a job, there's the telephone ringing, there's lots of things going on in that moment. But sometimes we get lost in this big scenery. So when that happens, for example, returning to the breath, or in this case, you do Kinhin, you just concentrate on the step that you're taking. It can help, but it's certainly not an answer to all of our life problems that just be with the breath. it can help a lot, but you can't do that for the rest of your life and expect others to take care of your family and your job. Probably I used this metaphor of the shepherd and the sheep in one of the workshops that we already did. Basically, the metaphor is the following. Imagine your mind was something like a big meadow, and maybe meditation, you think, oh, I'm going to just enjoy the quiet on this meadow. But then you hear all these sheep making noises, meh, 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 here, meh, 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 there. Basically, that's all the thoughts that come up, sometimes strong emotions that come up, things that somebody told you yesterday, and you're still angry about what that person told you. So in your mind, you already imagine meeting that person next week, and then I'm gonna tell him this and this. But if you tell this, then maybe he will say that. And if he says that, then. So this thing happening. So that's all these sheep, black sheep, white sheep. And during meditation, you realize at one point, that would be step 3, oh, there's a lot of noise going on here. And then the problem is, what do? You maybe heard, I'm supposed to let go of these thoughts. The sheep are supposed to be quiet. I need to tell them to be quiet. I have to separate the white sheep from the black sheep. I have to build fences. So before you realize this, you play the role of the shepherd. And also what often happens, these 5 minutes, they went good. But the next 5 minutes, they're not so good. So you try to give grades to your own meditation practice. Today I was very mindful, but the next day, maybe you're not so mindful. That's also something that the shepherd loves to do, kind of give himself grades. Today it was good, or it was not so good. And at one point, better sooner than later, we need to give a break to the shepherd. We should let go of this idea, I'm supposed to be the shepherd here. But rather, what I would like to invite you to do next is be like the sky. And that's something like Peter mentioned, Vipassana meditation. You're the big sky, and you allow everything on that meadow to happen. Focusing on the breath is a little bit like when the sheep start to make noise. You find that one big tree in the middle of the meadow, and the shepherd lies down and looks up into the tree. He sees the branches, he hears the sound of the wind in the branches. And when that happens, you forget about the sheep, or even if you don't forget totally about the sheep, you hear the meh, 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 but your mind is with the sound of the wind in the leaves. And that can help, but the next step, and Peter kind of hinted at that, you can't always focus on one thing. Sometimes you have to widen up. The next step would be not to lie under the tree, but to become the sky. And you see the sheep doing their play there. They're playing their game there. Maybe somewhere there's still the shepherd thinking that he needs to somehow control the game. But you don't identify with the shepherd anymore. You also don't identify with the sheep. You just let it happen. You just let happen what's happening during these 5 minutes. And there's train passing by, and the train brings you back into the moment. There's this body sitting here. There's the breath. There's the other people sitting around you. You already start to think about what you're gonna eat for lunch, stuff like that. But you don't tell yourself, I need to be focused on this or that, but you allow everything of that to happen without becoming a, how do you say, play ball? You don't let the sheep distract you. you become like, well, the sky, the space itself, where all of this realizes. And I think that's something that I think Anjin-san wanted to hint at when I asked her first about how did it work with the thoughts. You don't have to erase the thoughts. The thoughts are also part of the scenery, but you allow them to be there without being disturbed by them. Maybe I also used this metaphor of the mountain the last time. Like in Osaka, it would be Ikoma-san or it could be Lokko. You are like a Lokko, the mountain Lokko. You sit here. And that's also one reason why the posture is quite important. Like if you have a stable posture, it's easier also for the mind to develop this mountainous stability. You sit there like Mount Lokko and you see over there's Osaka, there's Universal Studios, there's the jet coasters moving. You see a big, how do you call these wheels, Kanlansha. You see that wheel moving and trains are moving, JR is moving, Hanshin is moving, Hankyu railway is moving and people are sitting in the railway. And usually what we do then, we also jump into the railway. We move with the thoughts. We also sit in the jet coaster. That's kind of what I said. Next time when I meet that guy again, I'm gonna tell him to leave me alone, leave me in peace. And in that moment, you're sitting in the jet coaster. Becoming like the sky in this metaphor would be a little bit like watching the scenery from the top of Mount Lokko. You see things are moving in all directions, but you're not sitting in the train. You're not in Universal Studios right now. You are the mountain. Let's try to practice that, becoming the sky, and just see the scenery as it is without controlling it like the shepherd. You are completely detached from the scenery. It might be a little bit more difficult because here, when you realize I'm thinking, what do you do next? You can return to the breath. In the case of the scenery, when you realize, oh, I'm sitting in the train, I'm not the mountain anymore, where do you return to? Well, you return to the mountain, but basically the mountain is everything. You return to the sky, but the sky is always there. So it's a little bit more difficult because you don't have this concrete point, that one point of breath. You return to everything. You return to the whole thing. What happens is that usually there's one part of the scenery that has the greatest force of attraction. For example, you see Universal Studios over there. There's a lot of movement, there's a lot of noise, there's the music playing. That's where your mind goes. When you realize that happened, you return to the whole picture. So you open up, and there's still this big attractive part there. But you allow the whole scenery, the other mountains, and there's the Seto Naikai, the ocean. You allow all of that to be part of your awareness without shutting that one part that's so attractive. You don't shut that out. Let's try it for 5 minutes and see how that works.